Bullies destroyed his father's legacy shoes. They never saw the champion coming. Ethan Reed kept his head down as he navigated through the crowded hallways of Oak Ridge High School. At 15, being the new kid was already tough, but being 5'6" and skinny made him an easy target. His dark eyes scanned the floor tiles, his strategy simple: blend in, stay quiet, survive the day. What nobody at Oak Ridge knew was that beneath Ethan's unassuming exterior lay the heart and skills of a champion. For 6 years, Ethan had trained relentlessly in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, earning his way to 2 state championships. His father, before passing away 6 months ago, had been his coach, mentor, and biggest supporter. The worn-out Nike shoes on Ethan's feet were the last pair his father had given him. They were old, with a tear forming along the left shoe's outer edge, a tear that had started during his last competition, the one his father had watched from a hospital wheelchair, beaming with pride despite his pain. Ethan's mother had offered to buy new ones, but he refused. He wasn't ready to let go. "Check out trash shoes coming through." The voice cut through Ethan's thoughts. Jason Miller, self-appointed king of the sophomore class, leaned against a locker with his 2 constant companions, Kyle Adams and Mike Torres. Jason had everything Ethan didn't: height, confidence, and wealth. His father was on the school board, a fact he mentioned whenever teachers came close to disciplining him. "Seriously, did you find those in a dumpster?" Jason continued, his voice carrying. "Or did your mom not have enough money for decent kicks?" Kyle and Mike snickered on cue, while other students looked away uncomfortably. Ethan kept walking, his face burning. His mother worked 2 jobs now to keep them afloat, after his father's medical bills had drained their savings. But the shoes weren't about money, they were about memory. He felt his hands instinctively tighten into fists, his body automatically settling into a stance. 6 years of training had made certain reactions reflexive. Ethan quickly relaxed his posture. Not here, not now, not over words. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Your training is for protection, not to hurt people who hurt your feelings. A true fighter knows when not to fight." "What's wrong, trash shoes?" "Nothing to say?" Jason called after him. "Those nasty things have some sentimental value or something?" Ethan turned the corner, escaping the laughter, but not the memories of his father kneeling beside the mat, patiently adjusting his stance. During lunch, Ethan found a quiet spot at the far end of the cafeteria and unpacked his homemade lunch. "This seat taken?" a cheerful voice interrupted. A girl with curly black hair and bright eyes, he'd seen her in English class, stood there smiling. "No," he mumbled, gesturing to the empty chairs. "I'm Layla," she said, sitting across from him. "You're the new kid, right? We have English together." "Ethan," he offered quietly, "how are you liking Oak Ridge so far?" Before Ethan could answer, a loud voice boomed from behind him. "Well, if it isn't trash shoes making friends with little Miss Nobody." Jason dropped his tray onto the table, deliberately knocking Ethan's water bottle over. Water soaked Ethan's sandwich. "Seriously, Jason?" Layla rolled her eyes. "Don't you have better things to do than welcome the new charity case?" "Nope." Jason grinned, showing too many teeth, just making sure he knows where he stands in the food chain. He leaned over, his face inches from Ethan's. "And it's at the bottom, trash shoes." Ethan said nothing, just methodically wiped up the water. His lunch was ruined, but he wouldn't give Jason the satisfaction of seeing him upset. "What's with those shoes anyway?" Jason continued, sliding uninvited into the seat beside Ethan. "Your family can't afford new ones, or maybe—" He paused in mock realization. "Maybe they're actually designer. Is looking poor the new rich kid trend I missed?" Kyle and Mike laughed on cue. "Leave him alone," Layla said sharply. "Or what?" Jason challenged. Ethan stood abruptly. "I need to get to class," he said quietly, packing up his soggy lunch. "Running away already?" Jason called after him. "Hey everyone, trash shoes might leave a trail of dirt behind him." Gym was Ethan's last class of the day, and the one he dreaded most, not because of the exercise, but because it was impossible to hide. Worse, it was the one class he shared with all 3 tormentors. Coach Briggs was a former military man who ran the class like boot camp. When he split the class for basketball, Ethan found himself on the opposite team from Jason, Kyle, and Mike, a small mercy. As they played, Ethan kept his skills in check. He could move faster and had better endurance than most of his classmates, but drawing attention was the last thing he wanted. "Reed," Coach Briggs barked. "Stop sleepwalking. Move like you mean it." Ethan reluctantly picked up his pace, intercepting a pass from Kyle to Jason and quickly passing it to a teammate. "Lucky shot, trash shoes," Jason growled as they crossed paths. After class, everyone headed to the locker room. Ethan always changed quickly and quietly in a corner, trying to avoid notice. Today, however, Jason and his friends deliberately took their time, watching him. "What's the hurry, trash?" Jason called as Ethan pulled his shirt over his head. "Got somewhere important to be?" Ethan said nothing, just continued changing. "I'm talking to you." Jason stepped closer, towering over him. "Think you're too good to talk to us because you got lucky in the game." Ethan zipped his backpack, preparing to leave. "I'm just trying to get home." "Oh, it speaks." Jason looked at his friends with exaggerated surprise. "I thought maybe you were mute." "Seriously," Mike added. "What's with those shoes? They're falling apart." Ethan shouldered his backpack. "They're just shoes." Jason blocked his path to the door. "If they're just shoes, you wouldn't mind if we took a closer look, right?" Before Ethan could react, Kyle shoved him hard against the lockers. The metallic clang echoed through the now empty room, Coach Briggs having left to lock up the gym equipment. Ethan felt his back slam against the metal, the wind momentarily knocked out of him. He could have avoided the push. His reflexes were fast enough, but years of training had become second nature. He remained upright, his eyes never leaving Jason's face. "Hold him," Jason ordered. Kyle and Mike each grabbed one of Ethan's arms, pinning him. Jason knelt down, examining Ethan's worn shoes with exaggerated interest. "These things are disgusting," he said, poking at the tear. "They're literally falling apart. There's poor, and then there's pathetic." "Let me go," Ethan said, quietly, his voice dangerously calm. Inside, his heart raced not from fear but from restraint. He could break free in seconds. A simple twist, a sweep of the leg, and both Kyle and Mike would be on the ground. But his father's voice kept him still. "A true fighter knows when not to fight. Not until we fix your shoe problem." Jason smirked. With sudden cruelty, he grabbed the torn edge of Ethan's left shoe and yanked hard. The tear widened dramatically, nearly separating the upper from the sole. "Oops, even more garbage now." Something cold and still settled in Ethan's chest. These shoes were the last gift his father had given him. They'd stood at the edge of the practice mat together, his father's thin hand resting proudly on his shoulder. As he'd opened the box, "Stop," Ethan said, barely above a whisper. "What's that, trash?" "Couldn't hear you over the sound of your shoes falling apart." Jason yanked again, and this time the tear extended all the way around. The shoe was now barely staying on Ethan's foot. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know what you taught me, but some lessons have exceptions." I said stop. Ethan's voice was different now, harder, assured. His posture changed too, making Kyle's grip loosen slightly in confusion. "Or what?" Jason challenged, standing. "What are you going to do about it, trash shoes? Guess Daddy didn't teach you to take care of your things, huh?" Ethan's control shattered. In one fluid motion, he twisted his right arm free from Kyle's loosened grip, simultaneously bringing his knee up sharply into Jason's stomach. Jason doubled over with a surprised "oof," all air leaving his lungs. Kyle reacted by tightening his hold, but Ethan was already pivoting, using the momentum to break Kyle's grip and deliver a precise elbow strike to his solar plexus. Kyle stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock. Mike attempted to tackle Ethan, but 6 years of training made avoiding the lunge effortless. Ethan stepped aside, grabbed Mike's extended arm, and used the boy's own momentum to send him crashing into the lockers. The entire sequence took less than 5 seconds. Jason was still doubled over when Ethan approached him. "My father gave me these shoes," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "The last thing he ever gave me before he died." Understanding dawned in Jason's eyes, quickly followed by fear. He attempted to straighten, raising his hands placatingly. "Look, man, I didn't know." Ethan's right hook connected with Jason's jaw, sending him sprawling. In that moment, all the grief, anger, and frustration of the past months poured out. Jason tried to crawl away, but Ethan followed, hauling him up by his shirt collar. "You asked what I was going to do about it," Ethan said, his voice eerily calm despite the fury in his eyes. "I'm going to teach you what my father taught me. Respect." The next punch knocked Jason back down. He raised his arms to protect his face, but Ethan's training had taught him to find openings. A quick jab to the ribs, a sweep to knock Jason off balance when he tried to stand. "Please," Jason whimpered, blood trickling from his split lip. "I'm sorry about your shoes, okay? I didn't know." You didn't need to know, Ethan replied, landing another calculated blow. You just needed to not be cruel. By now, Kyle and Mike had recovered enough to consider helping. They exchanged uncertain glances, weighing options. Don't, Ethan warned, without taking his eyes off Jason. Unless you want the same lesson. Mike backed toward the door. Kyle hesitated, then followed. You're insane, Kyle muttered as they retreated. No, Ethan corrected. I'm trained. 6 years of jiu-jitsu, 2-time state champion, and you three just destroyed the shoes I wore to win my last tournament, the one my dying father watched from his wheelchair. Jason was trying to sit up, his face a mask of pain and fear. We can get you new shoes, okay? My dad has money. You think this is about money? Ethan shook his head in disgust. You think you can buy your way out of basic decency? He grabbed Jason again. Those shoes were all I had left of him, and you thought it was funny to destroy them. For a moment, the only sound was Jason's ragged breathing. Then, somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. Someone's coming, Mike hissed from the door. Ethan looked at Jason's bloodied face and felt a wave of shame. What would his father think? He'd let anger take control, something his father always warned against. He released Jason's shirt, letting him slump back. This ends now, Ethan said firmly. You leave me alone. You leave everyone alone, or next time I won't stop. He picked up his backpack and walked toward the door, his destroyed shoe flapping with each step. You're dead, Reed, Jason called, his voice watery with pain and humiliation. My father will have you expelled. Ethan paused at the door. Go ahead and tell him, he said without turning. Tell him how the three of you cornered me and destroyed my property. Tell him how you've been harassing me for weeks. See how that works out. He pushed past Mike and Kyle, who scrambled away and left. Outside, Ethan leaned against the wall, his heart pounding. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him shaky and uncertain. He'd just done exactly what his father had taught him not to do, used his training to hurt someone who had hurt him emotionally. He'd lost control, but looking at his destroyed shoe, the last connection to his father now irreparably damaged, he couldn't fully regret standing up for himself. He walked, awkwardly with one shoe barely holding together. As he exited, he saw Layla sitting on a bench, apparently waiting. She looked up, eyes widening at his disheveled appearance and ruined shoe. Ethan, what happened? He shook his head. Nothing. I just need to get home. She stood up. You look like you've been in a fight. I'm fine, he insisted, continuing. Layla fell into step beside him. Was it Jason and his goons? Did they do that to your shoe? Ethan kept walking, jaw clenched. Jason has needed someone to stand up to him for a long time, Layla said. Whatever happened, I'm guessing he deserved it. Ethan glanced at her, surprised by her tone. I'm not proud of what I did. Sometimes bullies only understand strength, Layla replied. My mom says that. They walked in silence before Layla spoke again. What was the deal with those shoes? They seemed important. Ethan hesitated. My dad gave them to me before he died. They were my training shoes. Training for what? Jiu-jitsu. I've trained since I was 9. Layla whistled low. Guess Jason picked the wrong guy to mess with. Despite everything, Ethan felt a small smile. Guess so. I'm sorry about your dad, Layla said softly. And your shoes. Thanks. Ethan looked at the ruined footwear. I know I shouldn't be so attached to something physical. My dad would say the real memories are in here. He tapped his chest. But sometimes you need something to hold on to, Layla finished. Something that proves it was all real. Ethan nodded, surprised by her understanding. They reached a crossroad. I go this way, Layla said, gesturing right. See you tomorrow? Yeah, Ethan replied. See you tomorrow. As he continued home, Ethan sorted through his conflicting emotions. He was ashamed of losing control, but also felt relief. For months after his father's death, he'd felt powerless. Against the cancer, against the financial struggles, against being uprooted. Today, he'd reclaimed some power, even if not as his father would have approved. At home, his mother was still at her second job. Ethan went straight to his room and carefully removed the destroyed shoe. He placed both shoes on his desk beside the framed photo of him and his father at his last tournament. In the picture, his father was gaunt from chemotherapy, but beaming with pride as Ethan held his championship medal. I'm sorry, Dad, Ethan whispered. I know you taught me better, but I couldn't let them destroy your gift without consequences. The next morning, Ethan wore his only other pair of sneakers and headed to school apprehensively. Students looked at him and whispered. Somehow word had spread about the locker room incident. Inside, the whispers followed him down the hallway. Instead of his usual invisibility, Ethan felt exposed, as if everyone was watching. But there was something different in their gazes. Not mockery, but something almost like respect. Hey, Ethan, A boy from his math class greeted him with a nod. Several others acknowledged him similarly. At his locker, Layla was waiting. "So," she said, "you're the talk of the school." Ethan groaned. "Great." "No, it is great," Layla insisted. "Do you know how long Jason's crew has been terrorizing people? Everyone's glad someone finally stood up to them. They're nowhere to be seen this morning, by the way. Probably too embarrassed." As if on cue, the principal's voice came over the intercom. "Ethan Reed, please report to the office immediately." Layla gave him a sympathetic look. "Want me to come? I saw them in the cafeteria yesterday. I could be a witness." Ethan shook his head. "I need to handle this myself, but thanks." In the office, he found not only Principal Morgan, but also Coach Briggs waiting. "Sit down, Mr. Reed," Principal Morgan said, gesturing to a chair. Ethan sat, back straight, hands folded. "We've had a concerning report about an incident in the locker room yesterday," Principal Morgan began. "According to Jason Miller, you assaulted him without provocation." Ethan opened his mouth to defend himself, but Coach Briggs cut in. "That's not what the security footage shows." "What?" Ethan and Principal Morgan said simultaneously. Coach Briggs cleared his throat. "We installed cameras in the locker room hallways last semester after those thefts. There's no audio, but the footage clearly shows Miller, Adams, and Torres cornering Reed and destroying his property before any physical altercation." Ethan stared in disbelief. He hadn't known about cameras. "I see," Principal Morgan said, her tone shifting. "And why wasn't I informed about this footage before meeting with Mr. Miller's father this morning?" "Because I only reviewed it an hour ago," Coach Briggs replied. "After I noticed Reed's shoe was destroyed and Miller had a black eye in first period." Principal Morgan turned to Ethan. "Mr. Reed, while I understand you were provoked, violence is never the answer at Oak Ridge. Can you explain what happened?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Those shoes were the last gift my father gave me before he died. I've been wearing them because they connected me to him. Jason and his friends had been calling me trash shoes since my first day, but yesterday they held me against the lockers and deliberately destroyed my shoe. I lost my temper." Coach Briggs shifted. "Principal Morgan, when Reed enrolled, I received a letter mentioning his athletic achievements. The boy is a two-time state champion in jiu-jitsu. Given that and what I saw on the video, I'd say he showed restraint." Principal Morgan's eyebrows rose. "A martial arts champion?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan confirmed. "My father was my coach." Principal Morgan looked thoughtful. "That adds another dimension. Miller, Adams, and Torres essentially cornered a trained fighter, destroyed his property, and were surprised when he defended himself." She shook her head. "Nevertheless, fighting warrants consequences. All four of you will serve detention this week." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan nodded. "It could have been worse." Additionally, she continued, "I believe it would benefit the school if you channeled your skills positively. Coach Briggs tells me you've been holding back in PE. I'm authorizing him to create an after-school self-defense program, and I'd like you to assist as a student instructor. Would you be willing?" Ethan blinked in surprise. Yes, I would." "Good. That's settled then." Principal Morgan stood. "You may return to class, and please, next time seek help before resorting to physical means, regardless of provocation." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan agreed. "It won't happen again." As he left, Coach Briggs followed. "Reed," he said gruffly, "that was impressive restraint, according to the video. Miller and his friends are twice your size." Ethan shrugged. "My father always taught me that training was to protect, not to hurt." "Sounds like a wise man," Coach Briggs commented. "I'm serious about that self-defense program. We could use your skills." "I'd be honored," Ethan said sincerely. Teaching others had been part of his father's plan for him. This would honor that legacy. When Ethan returned to class, the whispers followed, but they felt different, curious, rather than malicious. At lunch, not just Layla, but several other students invited him to join them. "Is it true you're a state champion fighter?" one asked eagerly. "In junior jiu-jitsu, yes," Ethan admitted reluctantly. "And you took down Jason and both his friends." "At once?" another pressed. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I'd rather not talk about that." "He doesn't need to brag," Layla interjected. "Unlike some people, Ethan lets his actions speak." The conversation turned to other topics, and Ethan found himself relaxing. For the first time since arriving at Oak Ridge, he felt like he might belong. Jason, Kyle, and Mike were absent from lunch. When Ethan finally saw them in PE, they kept their distance. Jason sporting an impressive black eye and split lip. Coach Briggs kept them separated and no words were exchanged. After class, as Ethan changed quickly, he noticed Jason approaching cautiously, without his usual swagger. "Look," Jason said quietly, "about yesterday." Ethan tensed, preparing for confrontation. "I didn't know about your dad," Jason continued awkwardly. or that the shoes were from him. That was messed up. What we did. Ethan regarded him silently, unsure how to respond to this unexpected semi-apology. Anyway, Jason shuffled his feet. My dad says I have to pay to replace them. So, here. He thrust a folded check toward Ethan. It's enough for new shoes, whatever kind you want. Ethan looked at the check but didn't take it. I don't want your money. Those shoes can't be replaced. Jason's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Then what do you want? My dad already had to write a check to keep the school from suspending me. I don't want anything from you, Ethan replied evenly, except to be left alone, and for you to stop bullying others too. You think you're better than everyone now? Jason sneered, but uncertainly. Just because you can fight? No, Ethan said, zipping his backpack. I think everyone deserves basic respect. Something my dad taught me. Something yours apparently didn't. He walked past Jason, who made no move to stop him. At the door, Jason called after him. Reed. Ethan paused but didn't turn. Your old man would be proud, Jason said grudgingly. The way you fought, that was something else. Ethan glanced back, surprised by the genuine, if reluctant, admiration. Thanks, he said simply, then left. Over the next weeks, a new order established itself at Oak Ridge. Jason and his friends still sat at their usual table, still carried themselves with confidence, but the cruel edge to their behavior had dulled. They no longer tormented underclassmen or new students. When they passed Ethan, they gave him a wide berth and a respectful nod. Meanwhile, Coach Briggs's after-school program had taken off, with Ethan as assistant. Students who had previously been bullied were learning basic techniques to protect themselves and, more importantly, to carry themselves with confidence. It's not about being able to beat someone up, Ethan explained during one session. It's about knowing you can protect yourself if needed. That knowledge changes how you move through the world. Layla, who had joined despite reservations about violence, nodded. It's like armor you wear on the inside. Exactly, Ethan agreed, smiling at her insight. After class, as they walked home together, now a routine, Layla asked, Do you think your dad would approve of all this? Ethan considered seriously. I think he'd be disappointed that I lost control, he admitted, but proud of what's come from it. He always said the best fighters never need to prove themselves. They use their skills to lift others up. He glanced at his new shoes, plain black training shoes his mother had finally convinced him to accept. They weren't the same as his father's gift, but nothing ever would be. The torn pair now sat in a place of honor on his desk, a reminder not of what he'd lost, but of what he'd gained. The strength to stand up for himself and others, and the wisdom to know when to use that strength. Your dad sounds like he was amazing, Layla said softly. He was, Ethan agreed, and every day I try to live as he taught me. He straightened, feeling the confidence that came not from his fighting skills, but from knowing exactly who he was and what he stood for. One step at a time. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as they walked, two figures side by side, neither alone anymore, and in Ethan's mind he could almost hear his father's voice warm with approval. That's my boy. Always remember, true strength isn't in your fists, but in your heart.